Okay, so we're gonna start with a simple should we go to Mars prompt. So should we go to Mars?
Do you
I'll
want to
let
start or should I start?
you should start.
So, there's many ways you could look at it. In terms of science and science exploration, I think we should, like just like how we're doing with the Curiosity and the Perseverance rovers, we should go to Mars. But as in the topic as it comes up a lot, as in like saving the human race or as combating climate change, I don't
Yeah.
think we should.
So we shouldn't. Okay. So let
Okay.
to go
Uh,
deeper into that. I guess the prompt should be should we go to Mars? What should be the main focus? Going to Mars or fixing up the Earth?
uh,
If
I'll let you start.
All right. If we are going to go to Mars and terraform it to fit our needs, then we are already presuming we already have the technology to fix climate change back on Earth because creating a whole atmosphere, remember, the atmosphere of Mars is just 5% of Earth, then creating a whole new atmosphere is much, much harder than reversing our carbon dioxide emissions and protecting the planet.
Yeah.
Uh,
I yeah.
Here, let me give you my input on that. First of all, your question was, should we go to Mars? Well, we've already been to Mars, and I think yes, we should advance. We should go all the way, and every single type of what's it called? Every single type of way that can help develop and progress humanity and the technologies. We should 100% endure it because, for example, we've already sent the Mars rover. We've had other nations such as China, the only other nation, China, also sent a rover to Mars. Now, if should we send humans there? I believe we should, maybe for experimental reasons. But to be honest, we don't have the resources to have what's it called? Mass settlement of humans in Mars. Like for example, we have the ISS basically in space. We don't even have people on the moon. I've heard some people talking about having bases on the moon, but nobody has that yet. So we don't even have the capabilities. I think it'll be kind of a waste, and and technology and resources and time as well, because that's very important. To try to send humans to Mars and to, if we can't even have a permanent population, at least for experimental reasons on Mars. Yeah, obviously Mars is and the moon is different because Mars has an atmosphere that's, but the main thing is that Mars's atmosphere is obviously much thinner than Earth's, and while Earth is mostly nitrogen and oxygen, Mars's atmosphere is overwhelmingly carbon dioxide. So Earth's is much denser, much more breathable. Mars is like basically a much more thinner atmosphere. Like when you're climbing up mountains, how you can't really breathe and stuff like that. That's what Mars would be like.
I guess I guess my point is like which one should we prioritize, you know? If we have limited resources, and should we spend all that resources on fixing up the earth? I mean, we have like half the population not even having enough food to eat, you know? So like what should we prioritize? Science based or, you know?
If if we have the full ability to go to a planet, reshape its atmosphere, reshape the composition of the soil to make it habitable for us to grow agricultural crops and whatnot, then we definitely have that ability to at least minimally impact the soil on Earth. So if you are going to go from the perspective of helping poorer people, get access to food, we already do that. We already have LiDAR and sonar technology as satellites orbiting around the Earth, providing weather information that helps people on the ground plan their crop seasons. That's already
But like
done.
I'm talking about full, like so I want everybody on earth to have a living wage and food and shelter
Here,
and water.
here, yeah. Let me chime
I'm
in
talking
on
about
that.
the extreme.
Yeah, that makes sense. Listen, let me chime in. First of all, we should never ever stop prioritizing anything that has to do with technology and space, because these things also ultimately do help us, and they are reciprocal. Like for example, the military, they've always experimenting, and a huge part of their budget is on technology, and it comes back and we use it in our daily lives. Like for example, medical equipment. All of that stuff comes from the military. Our phones, computers that we're talking on, everything comes from military, and that's mostly from NASA, by the way, from basically from investing in technologies. To be honest, we don't have enough resources for the whole world's population. That should be an easy, simple question. The world's population is going to go higher and higher and higher. We can't
I
prioritize.
disagree.
We can't prioritize everybody in countries that are not,
I
Europe
disagree.
and America. How?
No, we do have enough resources to do either one.
To have
So if we
everybody
stop,
equal, to have everybody the equal standard of living? I wouldn't
no, if
mind that. Education is
if
the first.
Yes,
Yeah,
the
you know how
issue
much money goes into
we
space, like
we
it's not.
have vastly more resources than we have. The human population can be the amount of resources we have to sustain the human population is vastly way more than the amount of people we have on Earth. The issue is distribution. How do you distribute the resources? How do you get water from river-rich areas like northern Canada and get it to places that are in dire need of it, like the Sahara Desert? How do you get it there? That's the main issue. Distribution is the main issue, not the fact
distribution.
that there is too many people.
And here's the thing: if we're going to get what's it called? If we're going to be getting resources to poor people, we're going to have to amp up our technology. For example, like you mentioned, satellites help people. That where does that come from? That comes from funding and technologies that has to do with aerodynamics that goes through NASA and the European space agencies. If we fund technologies that has to do with space-related themes or space-related projects, and even if that costs a lot, it's going to come back and end up it's going to end up profiting humanity. Like, for example, I know he may be a little bit controversial. We have Starlink. Starlink is being used in many countries where people don't have internet and they don't have internet access. And the number one way to improve people's standards of living is by education. There is nothing you can't do anything without education. And many people, many people in third world countries, they need the internet to connect and to see what the outside world looks like instead of being propagandized, in their own homes and their own ecosphere. So if we have satellites, which is 100% all uh, comes from funding technology and space, then we can provide people with not just access to the internet, but also electricity and other resources that is fundamental to get people out of poverty. This isn't a question of helping humanity. If we want to help them in a more efficient way, we have to first invest in technology, which will help humanity's progress.
Okay. So we're ending up on the first prompt, and Ahmed, can you present the next prompt?
So the next prompt is about energy. How do you want to tackle the depletion of fossil fuels, and should nuclear energy be the solution?
And
Okay.
interesting.
Do you want to
You,
start?
you want to start or I'll start?
You can start.
All right. First of all, fossil energy, of course, we're going to have to mitigate that. Here's one problem of the fact of the matter is that a huge part of the population is against it for some reason because that's much more simpler to get. But you have to understand, look at countries, for example, like Europe uh, and many northern states, for example,
Mhm.
Washington, Vermont, they use renewable energy like hydropower, wind power, and everything like that. To be honest, this is also a matter of technology as well. You have to understand we should first go for the resources that are most abundant, which could be hydropower. Even though I don't agree that it should be 100% mostly focused on hydropower because that does end up damming rivers and damming up rivers and also damaging that could lead to substantial change in ecosystems. Like, for example, in China, they've built hundreds or dozens of and also hundreds of dams and many big ones that actually ended up either collapsing or causing irreversible damage. For example, here's one in Iran, the largest salt lake in Iran. What is it called?
You want me to present it?
Yeah, sure. It's called Lake Urmia, if I'm not wrong. If that's the name. Um, was basically from the last 30 years since the Islamic Revolution. What they've done basically is because of negligence and because they refused to search up Lake
Iran.
Urmia. Lake UR, there it is. Images. Yeah, go to the one where it shows the change. Like, here it is.
Which
Bottom.
one?
Next to it. Right. Right. Yeah, left. To the left. Yeah. What are you doing? This one.
This one? Yeah.
No. The map which shows the changes. Go down.
Oh, this one.
Yeah, go down. Scroll down though. That's
Okay.
the color change. You see to the left, to the very left. Move your
This one.
cursor
This one.
down,
Left, the
down.
far left down. Okay.
That's perfect. That's
Okay.
perfect. You can see what damming does to that. This 95% of Lake Urmia has dried up. Urmia, by the way, is a lake that provides resources to three different ethnic groups. Now, this is also a political thing that happened. I'm not going to get too much into it, but basically, the area is surrounded, is in the region of West Azerbaijan, surrounded by mostly Azerbaijanis, also a Kurdish minority, and also they used to be an Armenian minority that lived there. It's very one of Armenia's three Great Lakes. You see what happens when you end up damming the lake, damming the rivers and everything else that comes out behind it. Now, this isn't 100% from damming, but this is what happens when you have negligence and you end up basically using all the lake's resources. You end up drying up the lake, and this is why I believe that dams can cause a lot of damage, and hydropower is good, but it's also a resource that's also needed in other parts of the in parts
In
of Earth. What?
addition,
Yeah,
and in addition, look at the Aral Sea. You can look at before and after photos up there for the Aral Sea. It's
yeah.
almost completely depleted, and it's in dire condition. All the fish have been killed.
Yes.
It's
Even though,
generally it's
even though,
almost a dead zone.
even though I agree that the Aral Sea wasn't used for oh, what's it called, for hydro, it was also used for cotton for
It was
mostly
used for cotton.
substantial. Yeah, exactly. That the Soviet Union allowed it to. But you can also have skipping on the issues of hydropower. I think probably the best way to go for energy is probably solar, because that is, of course, the most abundant. Like you said, there is some kind of suggestion to build solar panels in the Sahara Desert, which is the area the largest stretch of desert in the world, hot desert at least, not Antarctica. We should
Yeah.
build solar panels in those areas, even though that's not an easy undertaking. On the other hand, you have nuclear energy. I believe that nuclear energy should be prioritized. I do believe that the people who are against it do have some very silly reasons, as in they fear weaponization. And again, I'm going to go back to the country of Iran, which, by the way, Iran has dozens of nuclear reactors. All but one have been shut down. The country says they're going to use it for good purposes, but in like again, that's a political thing. I'm not going to go into that. It's not. But nuclear energy should be prioritized. Europe shutting down their nuclear plants was because of protests, that people protesting against nuclearization, which I believe is, it's childish. This is something that it could replace fossil fuels. I do understand that nuclear energy does require mining uranium from many different parts of Earth, but you know, as long as the outcome of that is more, like basically the amount of nuclear energy produced actually replaces the amount of uranium mined, aka completely replace drilling. I think we should also prioritize as well, but I think solar energy is probably the best way to go.
But but the issue with nuclear energy is that the fact that it's not renewable in its current state. Nuclear fission, you have to mine uranium out of the ground. It's a very finite resource, which is why I support the investment into nuclear fusion, which requires deuterium atoms that are really available anywhere in the atmosphere. It's hydrogen atoms.
Yes, yes,
So there really should be some investment into it. But on solar, my main issue with it is that have you ever heard of the duck curve?
yes, I've heard.
And you know that it gets worse and worse the less people use energy during the daytime and
Yeah,
more during the nighttime.
yes. The reason why what's it called?
I mean, if it has the ability to store energy capacity for the nighttime, then that's a great
Yeah,
technological achievement that I would want to see.
yeah, I know the imbalance of solar energy production throughout the day is obviously something that we should take into account. But in reality, people are mostly active during the day. So, and I know, yes, we could just store solar energy, but the reason why solar energy I think is the best is because it is the most abundant resource that we have, and it's the only one where we don't actually have to invest in huge amounts of materials. But albeit, I'll tell you this: you do also have to mine, of course, for the solar panel itself. You have to get lithium and all those different things. But solar energy is also the one that's the most portable, the most widely used renewable resource around the earth, around the world.
I would like to see investment in hydrogen fuel technology. Right now, it's really unviable as a resource, but I feel like if we can get the cost of the subsidization down, it could genuinely become a new form of viable energy.
Yes, that's good, but there's also one problem: overuse. For example, look at Arizona, Arizona and Nevada. You have the damn, what's it called? For example, and this is why I think for America, I think we need to do solar energy completely, because we have many areas in the southeast that could support that. In America, you have suburbs which grow uncontrollably at the benefit of of course the billionaire class, just like fossil fuel benefits them. So what they've done in Arizona suburbs is completely outrageous. How they basically depleted the Colorado River, for example, just so they could end up having these huge amount of suburbs that are very, very extremely energy inefficient. And I tend to think of myself that Americans they did do they not think of the future at this point? Because just so you know, if you look at what happened to the Colorado River, if you look at these huge strands of land that is used and the amount of water that's been used and how basically it's basically all but depleted, we're going to have a substantial change in America if we're going to be using hydropower because that they will. I fear that other uses of hydropower will also end up like the Colorado River. And that's why I think solar is probably the best because in America you have a large array of very barren, hot desert, especially like I said in the southwest of the country.
But again, like I said, the main issue with solar is that not many people use light. Why would you use not that much energy during the daytime when there's natural light coming in and it's generally warmer temperatures? Of course, you might use the AC, but for most Americans, you generally don't use anything during the daytime. At the nighttime, you have the heater, you have to keep up with all the lights. It's generally more expensive. You have more kilowatt hours used during the nighttime. So it could create, like I said, the duck curve that we've been seeing the past 2 years.
Yeah, I do believe hydropower is the best. I'm just saying that there needs to be change in how Americans utilize it, and there needs to be better management so we don't have the debacle that we had, in Arizona and how they ended up
So,
destroying an ecosystem in a river because of, I guess, yeah, go on.
so are you guys saying there should be a restrictions about on how much you can use electricity or
Uh,
during the daytime?
I mean, I don't know how that's going to
There,
be wildly unpopular, but
you could advocate for conservation strategies like don't keep the room light on during, when you're not using the room. So, but that's
that's
more
very
common sense than
impractical.
Yeah,
anything.
Nobody's going to be able to enforce
impractical.
that. Americans aren't very caring of anything outside of their house, so I don't think they're going to really enforce that. That's the problem. Or
That's a good
you could just raise the price. That'd be a really simple one to stop
reason.
people. But
Okay, let's go to our third topic, and Sam's gonna be presenting that.
okay, one second. Okay, so the third topic is going to be basically anti-intellectualism. I believe this is a big one in America. Because in this country, if I'm going to be honest, most people are very, I don't want to say detached from reality, but America itself is a very insulated nation.
It's not even
They don't,
detached. It's more reactionary. They react against intellectualism, like anti-intellectual.
yes, they're very proud of being ignorant. I'll tell you that. Um, how can we, reform, especially the education system, how education is received, how it's implemented, and how we can have a more progressive society if we basically, because at this point, the way I see it, Americans seem to not really seem to care anything about themselves. How on earth can we reform this country? So we become a country that has basically that implements
China.
was no, okay, no. That's no. How can we have a country that implements critical thinking instead of being reactionary and just going on and thinking about how they can benefit themselves?
This also kind of ties into the education system because we all, okay, if you're not from Texas, you most likely know about the Common Core state standards. It's about 40 states in the United States have implemented it. Some have kind of retracted it. It's a huge nationwide protocol. I think in Indiana they have it too.
Yeah,
Protocol on how you should educate, like the different standards that children in English and math should be educated on. And I feel that, and there's so much reactionary pushback against it because of states' rights and that states should determine their education just like it's in the Constitution. But is it really supposed to be more like a constitutional quality? Should it be a state's rights when we're all one big society and that we should have a shared culture about how do we feel about the world instead of having a shared
yes,
common understanding,
yes. That also ties
common
into the
intellect?
yeah, that also ties it into the fact of this deregulation. But here's another also very big thing is the fact that many states want to privatize education for their own benefits is absolutely outrageous. That's a huge thing. But you also have other topics like, for example, No Child Left Behind, enacted by President Bush. Basically, what happened was they held schools accountable for um, for every child's basically for their performance based on standardized tests, which by the way is devastating. For example, if you look at schools here where I live, you have many schools that have teacher shortages because they don't get adequate funding from their states. And that's what happens when you give so much leverage to people in the states. Because the fact of the matter is that many sadly, most people are not very interested in seeing their states grow, and they would rather prioritize workers than educated people. No Child Left Behind is probably the most devastating thing done to the American ed. You go on.
The amount of devastation into the public education system is actually horrible. They converted so many schools to charter schools, which don't even perform better than on average than
Yes.
any public school. And since No Child Left Behind, I believe about a quarter of charter schools have already collapsed and failed.
Wow.
Yeah, it's basically profits. It's actually the thing is you might some people think that if they see this from the outside of America, they might think to themselves, was this an actual No Child Left Behind? Was it a devised plan so they could help boost America's standing in the world? Because America was in the top five of education. Now we're like in the basically rolled down to top 30 instead. But in reality, No Child Left Behind failed, and because seeing that, I guess the politicians in this country decide, and also at state level, they decided that if we can't implement our policies, we might as well just benefit from them. And it's all nothing. It's been nothing but profits for them. They seem to be what happens in charter schools and schools that they take money that was supposed to go to public education, and they end up taking it out and subsidizing it for charter schools and all these things, which I personally see as unnecessary. For example, public funding in many different accounts in the United States has been gone,
Yeah,
but in yeah,
go ahead. I was
uh,
gonna say,
yeah,
so I searched it up and this is what I got. This is opposed to what you said.
yeah.
How would you react to this?
The increases teacher compensation and the share of teachers with graduate degrees. First of all, it does not. I can tell you for a fact that you seeing through public education, teacher compensation is not going to go up. Their pay, their salary is not ever going to be going up. That's why they always have these unions, and that increases the share of teachers with graduate degrees. Here's the thing that's especially here in Republican states. If you want to be a teacher, if you want to come teach, for example, substitute teachers, when I was in high school, anybody can come do it if you basically get a certificate. They increase the teachers of graduate shares and degrees. It's not really. It doesn't mean they're qualified. Many teachers, especially in Republican states, if you want to become a teacher, there's no actual process that we had. That actually the process that they have isn't actually adequate enough for the teachers. That's why you get many teachers quitting early, or they don't have enough adequate education for their students. No Child Left Behind has no benefits whatsoever, in fact, and the fact that it hasn't been substituted for anything else. They've tried to arrange it, change it over the years, but they've never actually tried to get rid of it.
That's a good point.
And
Anyway,
yeah,
is there anything you want to say, Ahmad?
uh,
Ahmad?
I was about to add to my charter school point.
yeah,
The difference between the performances of charter and public schools is mainly attributed to corporate charter schools. Corporate charter schools are for-profit charter schools run by a company or corporation, and usually they have the same, even though they advocate that you should go to our charter school because we have a different curriculum, they often reuse the same curriculum as
Mhm.
the national level, except they hire non-union workers who will pay less. That's why they get the contract from the government to open up these charter schools because they say to the government that they can educate the same amount of children for less money. And that to the government that's really valuable. But they just use non-union teachers to fund that gap, that lower cost of education. And that results in lower outcomes for teachers, lower satisfaction, which leads to lower student learning, which leads to lower test scores, and so on. It's an enduring cycle.
yeah. And one of the huge negative of charter schools is that there is no oversight. They are way less transparent than public schools. They take advantage of looser regulations, basically, and they have no accountability. And the fact of the matter that the state is unable to monitor, and some of it is by design. It's not some kind of function. It's part of what they wanted, because if they have no oversight, and it comes back into their narrative of deregulation, so much so that's basically deregulation, as I view it, is a dismantling of government. No successful state in the world goes through successful deregulation, and deregulation is only built for profits, just like what this nation is basically built. What this nation is going to. They don't care about student education. In fact, it's better for them if they have less educated people in the world, because that means it very easily much the workforce in many blue collar jobs goes up, which means more money and more workers for them. The fact of the matter that there's no oversight means basically anybody can become not just an instructor, anybody can go student, and also how much money is being diverted away from schools into these charter schools is abhorrent because most of the funding does come from the state and also from the Department of Education. And the fact that they're taking federal funds and diverting it into uh, their own set up schools that they could basically use for their own profiting is basically showing that this is legalized theft, just like lobbying, as I call it. It's no oversight, no regulations. This isn't anything. They're not even serious about it. Let's be honest.
Okay.
Uh,
I, now we have one more prompt. Would you guys like to?
what do you guys have? What do you have on me?
We have 10 minutes left.
No, that's good.
Yeah.
This
10
prompt,
minutes for any
Yeah,
prompt.
any prompt.
which
We
one
will
thing from
cut this part out, by the
Yeah, you're good. Good. Hmm. I think I would like to talk about maybe I was gonna mention something about lobbying, but like that's a little complicated. It could be maybe public infrastructure, I guess, and we should have divert away from car dependency.
I mean, sure. Okay.
way. Okay. Can you state it right now? Starting
Yes,
right now.
yes. One of the other topics I have is two actually combined in one is basically how the United States and also Canada itself are one of the only nations that are basically very car dependent, and how they basically have normalized society with this sort of individualism that's impacted the United States because when you have a and the big problem is when you're a car dependent society, you end up spending more resources on cars instead of having public infrastructure, which many people from the lower end, since they don't have public infrastructure, since they don't have aren't able to afford and maintain their own vehicles or cars, they're unable to get equal access to everyday resources. And that's a huge part of the problem is that when you have a car dependent society, you have basically it's all for profits. For example, you have American suburbs. I'll give you this. They're very widely spaced out. They're very, very, very far reaching. And the fact to get from point A to point B, basically point A, your house, and point B could be your
It
job or your daily work.
drags it drags out utilities across American suburbia is a nightmare. All
It's
right.
yeah,
It not only everybody's farther apart, it creates a lesser community integration. It
yes,
makes so that everything you drag out to that community is more expensive. The utilities, water, electricity, it takes more wire per like to get connect each household, more piping, and then not to mention public transportation. You can't it take if you have a more denser community, it you can serve what 200 people, 100 people using one bus stop, right? Or what, like a subway station. But if you have American suburbia, what are you serving out here? 10,
yeah,
15 people max
Yeah.
in a single bus stop? It drags it out a full way, and it makes it so much harder to run actual effective materials. And it's not even. And then I know a YouTuber called Not Just Bikes. He mentioned the growth Ponzi scheme for suburban development. It road because there's so much suburbia and it's so far out. The amount of taxpayer money you get is not a lot, and not and the amount and respected to the amount of roads there are, and to maintain each unit of road, it roads wear down over time, right?
yeah,
So suburbia relies on the fact that that the suburban growth will continue growing and growing to fund the increasing road costs year over year. And the moment that breaks down, suburban communities start borrowing debt, loads of debt, it this is often at the expense of the actual city. I saw this cost-effective analysis done by a company called Urban 3. They did one of Eugene, Oregon, and Lafayette, Louisiana.
uh-huh.
And it found out that even the poorest neighborhoods in the inner cities, they produce way more net overall output than the wealthy suburbanites living out in the suburbs, of course.
Yes, and the fact of the matter that you have to understand is this car dependent culture also promotes a huge amount of individualism, basically, where you don't see, for example, if you're driving across the road and your daily stroll to work, you have thousands of other people around you, and you don't seem to notice them and you don't care about them because you're in your metal vehicle driving down through the roads, and you don't notice who's around. You don't have any self-awareness. You don't seem to care about others. That's why Americans care so much about profits. It ties into the fact that Americans could care less about what goes on around them because they have no awareness and they don't have any daily interaction with people. Because if a human basically is going to be over, you need to have social interaction with other people. That's why, and that suburbs fit perfectly with this kind of car culture where you're basically living in your own little bubble and you're separated by by space from other people. You don't even know your neighbors. You don't know who's around you. Just like when you're driving your car down the road, you don't know who your neighbors are. You don't know who's around you, and you end up feeling this, and it produces this individualistic type of view towards most Americans. And yes, that is true. When, for example, most of American rail infrastructure, I'll give you this, was actually bought out by who? By car companies. Most of American rail infrastructure before being tore down was actually bought up by car companies so they could build their own highways and stuff. And many of these highways actually tear right through cities and they end up destroying local infrastructure. And here's an example. Many people do remember they think fondly and they think the best times of their lives were their college years. And you might ask why? Because many college towns, if you go to a college town, they're very walkable. And you don't even need a car to live. For example, if I go down here, Bloomington, Indiana, IU, or go to Purdue, they're very walkable cities, and they end up resembling more of a European type build. And the reason is simple because most college students can't afford cars, so they make it easier for them by making the cities more walkable, and not and they end up prioritizing their students over profits. You end up seeing what the results are, what kind of people come out of college. Meanwhile, in most American cities, you don't even have proper sidewalks. And if you're going to use the sidewalks, if you're going to end up using, you end up walking instead of using, bikes or rail infrastructure, which is basically non-existent. You end up basically having to stroll across huge amounts, lanes that are very wide, that could be 4 to 7 to 8 lanes wide, and they're very dangerous to cross over. Especially one problem is America differs from other countries. They don't have other countries compared to America is that they don't allow cars to turn right on red all the time. The fact of the matter is that if you're going to walk from one point and you end up crossing the road, if a car comes in and turns right, they could very much hit you. Yeah.
As a person who regularly walks around the place, even when I was in New York and here sometimes, it's such a deadly thing to have cars that are able to turn on right, just have to yield. Yield. It's a beg button sign. What
Yes.
do you have to do? To beg, you have to beg on a button to go across the road.
Exactly. Most cars don't even
It's a
pay
beg
attention.
button.
Most cars don't even stop to see who's there because when they're turning right on red, they're probably in a hurry, so they won't even notice you.
Not even that. It's also that, but like also people in cars are focused on what other cars are doing on the road.
Yeah.
When I drive, I'm not really. Are you really focused on the people who are pedestrians or the actual car movements?
Yeah, because when cars turn red, they have to look the other way to make sure no cars are coming from the from turning left coming into their lane. Because if it's red, that means they have to. It's not safe for them to turn, but they can turn. One thing I noticed is that when I was driving through college towns, I would come so close to hitting college students because most college students are used to being able to freely walk across sidewalks and lanes without having to worry because those environments are very car subsidized. So the fact that I was strolling through with a car, I was surprised at how college students are kind of like unaware. They end up just crossing the road without even caring or worrying about cars. And I would always have to stop in the middle of the road when I'm turning right so I could wait for them to cross. And yes, most cars are paying
So,
attention to what's on the other side than what's on your side.
so my question is, so what should be the solution? Should we,
We have
what
to
would you guys, yeah,
I believe that first of all, most American infrastructure at this point, first of all, we need to stop building outwards and stop expanding and start thinking of building high-rise building. That's the most simplest approach. But also the fact that maybe a country, the third largest country in the world, and we don't even have rail infrastructure. Compare China's to ours. China's has thousands of miles. They have the fastest
Abolish
trains in the world. Yeah, continue.
abolish zoning laws that promotes outward development. Having mixed use development promotes walkable, integrated communities. But I do think we might have to, and yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
we're running out.
Oh,
Yeah, we're running in 1 minute and 30 seconds. And so
why does your camera quality look better this time? Like when you were recording, it looked weird.
Kind of
It looks
grainy,
much
bro.
better now.
I know. I know
What?
it's the light. I just turned on the
What?
light.
Why'd you turn it off?
It was always on because the sun went out. So
It was much better now. And then you look so
we're gonna
grainy.
cut this part out too. Okay. You made us look unprofessional.
No, I know, because
Yeah, my
it was
bad.
surprising, genuine.
All right. We'll just cut this off, but should we end it? How should we end it? It's less than a minute.
We have a minute left. I'll let you guys start.
I thank you guys. This was a good episode.
Yep.
You'll have more episodes coming in weekly. And so, yeah.
So,
Anything?
no.
You guys
All right.